The congregation gasped. Their beloved pastor stood trembling on the sidewalk. His glasses cracked, his Bible lying in a puddle. Two officers had just slapped him across the face, mocking him with laughter. They thought they were dealing with just another black man they could humiliate. But what they didn't know was that this same pastor would soon hold their very lives in his hands. Before we dig deep into this shocking story, kindly hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on your notification bell so you never miss real stories that reveal the darkest truths and biggest betrayals. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments. And remember, your subscription means the world to us. Pastor Elijah Daniels was walking home from an evening prayer service in his small town. He wore his usual dark suit, Bible tucked under his arm. But that night, fate put him on the same path as two patrol officers, known for abusing their authority, especially against black men. The officers stopped him without reason. "Hey, preacher man," one sneered. "You think your prayers can save you out here?" Before Elijah could answer, one of them shoved him against the wall. Then came the slap, hard, sharp, humiliating. Elijah's glasses shattered. His Bible fell. Still, he whispered, "God forgive you." They laughed. To them, he was powerless. The next morning, whispers filled the town. Members of Elijah's church were outraged, but Elijah himself refused to press charges. "Vengeance is not mine," he told them. "Justice will come in its own time." But the officers bragged at the local diner. "Slapped that pastor so hard his Bible hit the ground," one chuckled. They didn't know a stranger overheard, a stranger who would play a role later in their downfall. A week later, the same officers were on a late-night call. A gang dispute had spiraled out of control. Gunshots echoed through the alley. In the chaos, the officers were ambushed. Trapped inside their patrol car as bullets shattered the windows. One officer was shot in the leg, bleeding heavily. The other screamed for help, but no backup was near. And then, through the smoke and gunfire, Pastor Elijah appeared. Elijah had been on his way home from counseling a troubled youth when he heard the shots. Instead of running away, he rushed toward danger. He dragged the wounded officer from the car, shielding him with his own body. With nothing but his coat, he pressed on the bleeding wound to keep him alive. "Stay with me," Elijah said firmly. The officer who had slapped him days earlier looked up in shock. Why are you helping me?" "Because your life matters to God," Elijah whispered. Backup finally arrived. The gang scattered. Both officers were rushed to the hospital alive. Because of the man they had humiliated, the town exploded with news. The same black pastor who had been mocked and slapped had risked his life to save his abusers. The officers couldn't hide their shame. At a public town hall meeting, one stood before the congregation, tears streaming, and said, "I thought I was powerful when I slapped you. But Pastor, you showed me what real power is: mercy." The incident didn't end with apologies. The town itself split into two. Some hailed Pastor Elijah as a saint, a man who lived out his faith even under abuse. Others accused him of being weak, claiming he let the officers off too easily. Arguments erupted in grocery stores, on sidewalks, even in church pews. Was forgiveness enough, or should justice still be pursued? Elijah stood firm. Forgiveness does not erase justice, but it heals the heart before justice arrives. Despite Elijah's mercy, the police department couldn't ignore the public outcry. An internal investigation began. Witnesses at the diner testified about the officers bragging. The department suspended both men pending review. One officer begged Elijah to speak on their behalf. But Elijah only said, "I will speak truth, not cover sin." The truth is enough. The officers feared losing their badges, the very power they had once abused. Then a revelation stunned the community. Elijah had once studied medicine before becoming a pastor. Years ago, he left medical school after his wife's tragic death, choosing to dedicate his life to ministry instead. That night at the ambush, his medical training resurfaced, instinctively allowing him to save the officer from bleeding out. The town realized his past and his present had collided, creating the miracle that saved those men. One officer couldn't handle the guilt. Haunted by Elijah's mercy, he spiraled into drinking. He visited the pastor late one night, confessing, "I don't deserve to live. You saved me, and I hate myself for what I did to you." Elijah placed a hand on his shoulder. Redemption is not earned, it's received. Choose to live differently. It was the first time the officer had truly wept since childhood. Months later, Pastor Elijah was invited to speak at the police academy. Standing before rows of recruits, he told the story not to shame, but to teach. Power is not in the badge or the uniform. True power is restraint. True strength is mercy. Among the audience sat the very officers who had once slapped him. Now they listened as students of the man they once despised. The town that had been divided slowly began to heal. And Elijah's legacy lived on. A pastor who turned humiliation into salvation and enemies into brothers. News outlets caught wind of the story. Headlines screamed, "Black pastor saves cops who slapped him." National reporters flooded the small town. Cameras followed Elijah everywhere, but he never sought fame. "I am not the hero," he told them. "The lesson is bigger than me." Still, the story ignited debates across the country about race, policing, and forgiveness. Some praised him, others criticized him, claiming mercy allowed injustice to breathe. Though Elijah had forgiven, the state pressed charges against the officers for misconduct and assault. In court, Elijah testified calmly, "They wronged me. That is true, but they are not beyond redemption. I only ask for accountability, not destruction." The judge, moved by Elijah's words, sentenced the officers to community service and mandatory training rather than prison. The decision polarized the community again, but Elijah's words carried weight. "Justice is not revenge, it is correction." Months later, one of the officers, Michael, began attending Elijah's church secretly. He sat in the back pew, head bowed, ashamed. One Sunday, during a sermon on grace, he broke down in front of everyone. "I slapped this man," Michael confessed, voice shaking, "and he saved my life. I don't deserve forgiveness, but I need it." The entire church rose to their feet, some in anger, others in compassion. Elijah stepped down from the pulpit, embraced him, and said, "You are forgiven." That moment shook the town. Remember the troubled youth Elijah was counseling the night of the ambush? His name was Darren. He had once flirted with gang life, but Elijah's patience pulled him back. When Darren saw how Elijah risked his life for the same officers who disrespected him, he made a vow. "If the pastor can forgive them, then I can forgive my enemies too. I'll break the cycle." Darren later became a community organizer, turning dozens of kids away from violence. The ripple of Elijah's mercy grew wider than anyone imagined. Years later, Elijah fell gravely ill. His body was weak, but his spirit remained strong. On his hospital bed, visitors lined up, church members, neighbors, even skeptics. But when two familiar faces walked in on Michael and his partner, the very officers who once humiliated him, silence filled the room. They knelt beside his bed, tears streaming. "Pastor," Michael whispered, "you saved us twice, once in the alley and once in our souls." With his final strength, Elijah smiled. "Then my mission is complete." The pastor, who had been mocked, slapped, and shamed, left the world having saved even his enemies. His legacy became a living story, retold for generations. Sometimes fate flips the script in ways we never expect. Pastor Elijah didn't just save their lives. He shattered the cycle of hate with forgiveness. Some stories end with revenge, but Pastor Elijah's ended with forgiveness that shook an entire town. He proved that the greatest strength is not in striking back, but in breaking the chain of hate. Thank you for watching. If this story touched your heart, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on your notification bell so you never miss real stories that reveal the darkest truths and biggest betrayals. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments. Your subscription truly means the world to us.